Jeremy Lucurco, City of Walnut Creek staff and Transpac rep.
John Cunningham, Contra Costa County.
Eric Hughes, City of Pleasant Hill staff.
Paul Reinders, City of Pittsburgh.
Yvette Ortiz, City of El Cerrito and WIC Tech.
Steve Kursavant, City of Brentwood.
Lambert Bowen with the County Connection.
Stephen Jones, Town of Danville.
Michael Stella, Town of Danville. Charlie Mullen, City of Clayton.
Leah Greenblatt, City of Lafayette.
Thanks. So we're moving on to public comment. Any members of the public here? Okay. So item C, approval of summary actions. It's not included in our packet today, so we'll postpone till the next meeting. Now moving on to consent calendar. Do I have any motions?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Approved. Okay, moving on to the regular agenda items. Item number 4, project monitoring, upcoming obligation deadlines for federal aid projects, and status of projects placed on FHWA quarterly and active lists. We have a
My name's Walt Allen with Parsons, and I'm presenting the staff report for the this item. This is our monthly monitoring. Before I start that, actually, I wanted to mention something about the previous item about funding, and that is the CTC approved the ATP projects, the Active Transportation Program projects that was yesterday. Unfortunately, none of the projects that were nominated in Contra Costa County were recommended for funding. So the next phase of that is the regional ATP project funding that comes through MTC, and they'll be making a recommendation early in September. So just a heads up, that's what's going on with the ATP. So getting back to the project monitoring, the STIP program status report is here, and that's just for your information. The federal aid project status report is. I just want to point out that this item that is in your agenda packet has been revised, and what's on your desk is the revised format that includes the comments for all of the projects on the same page as the project listing. So that's what you see in front of you is something that's a little bit easier to understand how that all goes together. But what we're looking at right now is there are a number of projects that are currently programmed in the year 2015, and a number of these projects have been requested to be moved to the 2016 fiscal year. So that request has gone into MTC to include in their upcoming FTIP. So that we'll find out actually formally in September when those projects are actually going to be moved. We expect that they'll all be moved, but we don't know for sure until MTC staff comes out with that recommendation. But so anyway, this is really just an ongoing effort to check in with local agencies about what's going on with the milestones on their projects, and we're doing that, and we're following up, and we're finding that everybody's moving ahead and getting field reviews scheduled and moving forward with their NEPA process and the right-of-way certificates. So the deadline for submitting is, of course, February 1st, 2015. That's when you have to submit your E76 requests. So speaking of E76 requests, there is going to be a training that you should have received a notice about. That's on September 24th in San Jose, there's a local assistance training about the E76 process and the requirements, and that's being hosted by Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. So if you're interested in that, you need to reply to that email, to the email address to our Celeste Fiore. It was listed on that email. If you didn't receive that email, or for some reason you just need to contact CCTA and ask them to send that email to you. Finally, we have inactive obligations. So that's all. Just it's looking pretty good, actually. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, consideration of proposed roadway classification changes to the California road system submitted by the town of Danville. Hi, Matt.
Thank you. So today we have kind of a routine item. It's routine in that all the cities in the county can request changes in their roadway functional classification. We get about 1 or 2 a year. So a couple months ago, back in June, we received a request from the town of Danville, and they are requesting changes in functional classification for 9 of their local roadways. Functional classification, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a classification of roads that's administered by FHWA. Any road that is basically classified as local roads in urban areas, we are considered to be in an urban area, is not qualify for federal aid funds. Anything above that does qualify for federal aid funds. There are requirements or considerations for the roadways to be above that level of classification based on the ADT, the roadway characteristics, connectivity, so forth. And we've included the FHWA's guidelines in attachment A. I understand there are new guidelines, so we will start using those next time around, including them in the agenda. And all of the changes, first they have to get our buy-off. We basically, staff here reviews the requests, make sure they make sense, and then we go to you, the TCC, and ask for your approval for us to write a letter of concurrence and submit that it goes on to MTC and then to Caltrans District 4. Caltrans is responsible for kind of logging all the changes and making sure they all qualify under the guidelines, and then it goes from Caltrans to FHWA. So I've got Stephen Jones and Michael Stella here from the town of Danville in case you have any questions about their specific requests. If you look in under item 5, you'll see there's a flow chart in there of the process I just described. And then following that, on page 518 is Town of Danville's letter requesting the changes. It's gone through their city council, so they have a resolution regarding these changes. I'm not going to go through each change. We did review them, the 9 change requests that are in the letter, and they all make sense. I believe 4 of the roadways would be going from local road to an arterial or collector, which would make them eligible for the federal aid funds. The rest are just being upgraded based on their roadway characteristics, and several of them are to kind of to fill a gap where the classification was one thing on either end but another in the middle, so they just want to make it consistent along the roadway. And like I said, staff concurs with their requests. And so our recommendation is to have you approve staff writing a letter of concurrence and forwarding that to MTC and Caltrans. So that's the item, and I can answer any questions, or if you have any questions for the town of Danville, they are here.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Paul?
Is this the first time they've proposed these changes?
The town of Danville? Yes.
Do we have any motions?
I'll move to approve the draft letter.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passed.
Thank you.
Approved. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, final design peer review downtown Danville multimodal access improvements project, phase 2 Railroad Avenue improvement project.
Yes, as required by Measure J, if a project has a total construction cost over $500,000, it has to go through, and is receiving Measure J funds, it has to go through the peer review process, and the town of Danville has a project. It's project 1226. It's receiving Measure J TLC or Program 12 funds for the downtown Danville multimodal access improvements project. It's phase 2. Phase 1 is more with wayfinding signage in downtown, and this is improvements to Railroad Avenue. There was a peer review on the 18th of March. It was 95% design plans, and we had a Lori Sukgang from town of Moraga, and who was the other person? I think it was Larry Thies from Orinda, reviewed the project along with Parsons staff. They held the peer review, and they recommended a few changes. The town has made a number of changes to their design based in response to those suggestions. And staff is asking that you approve the peer review for this project so that they can begin construction. And either I or the town staff could answer any questions that you have about the project. I don't want to make it too open-ended to ask any question about any subject. We'll just limit it to this particular project.
Any questions or comments? Any motions?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
you.
passes.
Thank you.
Item 7, update on Senate Bill 743, draft guidelines for transportation impact analysis in CEQA.
Brad and I are playing tag team here today. Let me get on the right item here. Basically, we're coming back to you with an update on Senate Bill 743, which if you weren't here last time we talked about it, I think in probably April or May. Senate Bill 743 by Paul Steinberg basically seeks to make some changes to CEQA, and the real impact on transportation agencies is the elimination of level of service as a finding of significant impact under CEQA. And in the bill, it was proposed to be, around transit-oriented developments. So within a half mile of transit-oriented developments, level of service would no longer, for vehicles or vehicle delay in general, would no longer be used as a finding of significance. They developed a preliminary draft of the guidelines. It wasn't actually the guidelines, it was a discussion draft looking at potential metrics and how this would be rolled out in the future. And now they were given a deadline of July 1st to release the actual deadlines, they being the Governor's Office of Planning and Research in Sacramento. They didn't quite get it out by July 1st, but they did get it out, I think, by the end of last month. So now we have those draft guidelines. We posted them on the web, and so I'm not sure if any of you took a look at them. They're interesting, and that's what we're going to discuss here today. Basically, like I said, it was, as proposed, it was meant to remove that finding of significance from CEQA around transit-oriented developments. However, in the guidelines, it does expand that to statewide. So anywhere statewide, whether in a within a half mile of a transit-oriented development or outside. So you all will be impacted by this. However, they do state in the guidelines that if you have any level of service requirements in your local planning documents, in your zoning code, in any of our documents, regional documents, that those can still be used, but that if it's a CEQA project, that level of service or vehicle delay will no longer be used. So that begs the question: what do you use? In their preliminary report that they released last year, they indicated that VMT would most likely be that metric, and that's what they've reinforced here in the guidelines. Vehicle miles traveled and trip generation would be the main metrics being used. So the guidelines do go into some detail on what types of VMT would be used and how to calculate those types of things. So I'm just going to go through some main points here. The first thing they discussed is, well, do we add a new section to CEQA? Do we just put it in the appendices? They've decided to add a new section in CEQA that discusses the changes, and we've included the actual changes to text in your attachment A. So you can kind of, if you just want a quick look at what the changes are, you can look there. They talk about setting thresholds. They leave that up to the lead agency on the CEQA document. Leave it up to them to set the thresholds that would be used. They basically talk about how to calculate VMT in a transportation project or versus a land use project, changes in general plans. So there's different considerations depending on what the type of project is. Safety is a big issue here. So not only are they, not looking at vehicle delay, they're focusing on the pedestrians and bicyclists and transit, and safety of those users is taken into consideration. They stress the role or the use of professional judgment when making these calculations and coming up with new mitigations for impacts. And they also propose a phased approach to the rollout, or as they call it, the applicability of the new metrics. And so what they're saying is that any projects that have already started are kind of grandfathered into the old system. Any new projects that are in transit-oriented areas would have to go by the new rules. And then starting January 1st, 2016, everyone's under the new rules. So, most of you have over a year to get familiar with the new rules, but some of you may have to start dealing with the new rules, now if you've got well, not now because these haven't been adopted, but once these are adopted, you'll have to start playing by the new rules if you have a project in a transit-oriented area. Just wanted to go into a couple of things here. We're coming to you because we want to submit comments to OPR on the authority does on behalf of all you. You're all welcome to, as cities or transit agencies, you're all welcome to submit your own comments to OPR. They're due, I think, the 10th of October? Yes. 10th of October. So we do plan on submitting something. So if you do want us to get specific comments in our letter, please let us know. Sorry, my vision isn't what it once was, so I'm having trouble finding my notes here. Here we go. So the different types of VMT that would be used in the calculation would be, options are a trip-based VMT, which would basically look at any VMT that from trips that begin or end at the project site. There would be tour-based VMT, which would look at a tour. I leave my house, I go to the bagel shop, I go to work, I go to drop my laundry or my cleaning off. You have a tour. If any of those tours hit the project site, hold on a second. Sorry, I had eye surgery. My alarm is telling me I need to put in my eye drops. That's tour-based VMT. There's also an idea that we've talked about at a subcommittee we have with our CMA Regional Modeling Working Group, where we've talked about MTC possibly creating a map of kind of a VMT map. And if your project fell in any one of these it would be, kind of a map showing ranges of VMT around the region. And if your project kind of fell in any one of those rings, that, you would use that VMT as your calculation. All these are, we're discussing these things at the regional level. There's area-wide VMT, so that would kind of look at average VMT for the region. So MTC is calculated. Area-wide VMT is looking at total VMT produced with and without the project. What I was going to talk about was, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Another important part of calculating VMT is the denominator you choose. So if you're looking at a particular land use project, in choosing the denominator, is it a housing development? If so, you would choose VMT per capita for residential. If it's a development that would be building new job sites, it would be VMT per employee. There's also per person trip that you would use in. Sorry, my notes are all thrown off here. I know what I'm back to my thought I lost. Okay, so if you're looking at land use projects, say a general plan development, you'd be comparing the VMT changes there against the regional land use. So MTC has calculated regional land use as part of their RTP, and basically, if your project is exceeding the regional average for VMT, then your project would be seen as having a significant impact. If it comes in with a VMT below the regional per capita average, then it would be seen as not having a significant impact. So that's for land use projects. There's a lot of things going on here. As you can tell, I'm certainly not an expert on this yet, but there's induced VMT. So whether a project, a roadway capacity project would induce travel and add VMT to the regional system, that's something that needs to be examined, whether it creates longer trips, whether it affects mode splits and adds more drivers, takes away from transit, whether it produces change in routing, whether it creates new trips, or whether it results in changes in land use. And that's all I'm going to discuss today. But I encourage you to pull this document down. The appendices have sample VMT calculations using all the items I just mentioned. Also, it includes a list of tools, applicable tools for calculating VMT. Are you using a regional model? Are you using a county model? Are you using off-model tools? And it lists a whole bunch of off-model tools. There's Urbemus, which is the Air Resources Board does that, and that's actually what our model uses. The CCTA model has Urbemus kind of embedded in it and produces a VMT summary for each city and for the county. So we have a lot of that information available for you now from the model. If you need to see kind of what the average or what the VMT for your city is, we can provide that for you now. But there's a whole bunch of tools. Fair and Peers has a tool. There's about 12 or 15 different tools listed here. So I apologize for jumbling the order of things there, but there's a lot going on. We still have about a month and a half to come up with some comments, but like I said, we do plan on submitting comments by the October 10th deadline, and we encourage you to do so as well. I do want to reiterate that you still are allowed to use VMT, LOS as part of your local studies, especially if it's called for, if it's in the action plan. A lot of MTSOs are still LOS and didn't change this time around, so we would expect that you would be using that, maybe in addition to VMT or along with VMT. We've heard that's what a lot of cities are going to be doing, is using both VMT and LOS. And a VMT maybe for the planners and LOS for the engineers, something like that. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I'd be willing to attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from the committee members? Leah?
I have a few. So you mentioned that the CCTA is going to be submitting a letter. Do you have any idea now what the comments might be?
We actually haven't discussed this. We've only had this. We just got this, I think, a week and a half ago or so. Released on the 6th. And I don't think they sent an email blast out till a couple days later. We're just going through this. It would probably, You know, our initial comments in the last round were that we didn't think it should apply outside of transit-oriented areas, but we had a feeling they were going to go statewide, and they did. So that will probably no longer be our primary comment. We might be commenting on the tools used, the type of metrics being used, but I'm concerned about the tools being used, so I think that'll be one of our comments.
So one of the things you said you were going to comment or weren't going to focus on anymore was outside the transit-oriented areas. So I understood that, there's this regional, or, the MTC might have a VMT average, and the county could have a VMT average. I'm wondering, maybe we should be focusing our comments on how does that work when it goes statewide? Mm-hmm. Because, if you're in a more urban area, your VMT is going to be very different than in a rural area or a less developed area.
That's a good point, because the guidelines do refer to the regional average, and the region in the guidelines is the MPO, which is the 9-county area. So, it's.
But it also says you can do it at the county level. So I guess my question was the county going to be doing that? But it sounds like the working group had identified these VMT rings, which I thought that was kind of clever, but I just didn't know how that worked once we get to January 2016, is it? How is it going to apply to the rest? And then my last kind of comment is maybe they should have a period where we do a test or trial period of this, and so we can make some tweaking before finalizing it.
That's a good point.
Michelle?
Hi, thank you. First of all, I really love the direction that they're going with this. I think it's really great. And for us smaller jurisdictions, I think the reliance on the region to do modeling and estimation and is going to continue to be pretty heavy, particularly for, as we move to multimodal, just as much discounting as possible on the bicycling, the transit, and the walking, but and I guess mixed use. But one of the things to maybe think about might be a program where within the PDAs we're doing some specific modeling and trying to link that to general plan updates, and so we can streamline processes kind of coming through. So that would be a project for the future. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure to point out in here that I don't support, and it's the whole section that starts on page 7-8, which is all on energy. So we've got this citywide emphasis right now on energy, and a lot of us that are community development directors are experiencing that in the building permit stage. Just really, I'll just say it out there, it's just really challenging energy requirements to integrate into building practices when the technology really hasn't kept pace. And then the Department of Energy and then at the state level, their models are just clunking along. And I've done a lot of climate action plans. I've done quite a few general plans. And what they're asking in here, they're introducing kind of along with what a lot of jurisdictions have wanted to see, which I think is the whole front end, and I'm really pleased with the direction that they're going in. But this introduction of energy conservation as part of a CEQA analysis, and they're introducing that as part of the CEQA process, that as part of a project, you're going to look at local and regional energy supplies, intensiveness, resources, peak and base period demands, but they're not really defining energy, and energy comes in a lot of different forms, air, wind, water, methane, coal, production, closed loop, open loop, production. It's just really a lot. So it would be really good to get a definition of energy in here, to really figure out what kind of models are acceptable to use for this purpose, to introduce what are the thresholds of significance, as well as they begin to talk about, kind of on the last page, mitigation measures, but they really don't prioritize them in terms of low or high priorities. And there are huge differences kind of in energy, goals and protection when it comes to mitigation. And it's not really clear what they're trying to link to here. They're introducing energy at the project level, but they're not really saying, are we linking it to AB 32? Are we linking it just to the project? Are we linking, because a lot of general plans don't. What we're required to do is really look at whether there's adequate energy to serve the general plan build out. So if we're really going to be linked to that, these might be okay. We could say, yeah, PG&E says we can, or our utility says we can, or our community choice aggregation with the introduction of solar, yeah, we say we can. But without those defining, information or modeling tools or clarity, this could be a really touchy second half of the policy recommendation. So I just wanted to make sure to clarify that part of it, because I don't know how many people read that part. So that we'll be writing a letter on our concern on that part of it.
Great. Yeah, definitely the city should be really weighing in on that part. It's a little outside of the purview of the authority, and this is kind of the first we've seen of that part of it, but I can understand how that would be challenging for you guys.
John?
Yeah, on page 7-6, there on item number 2, under induced vehicle travel and transportation projects, it suggests that the transportation analysis should analyze whether the project will induce additional automobile travel. I guess one comment that I know we'll make probably through CSAC, but I would encourage the authority to make, is that should either be struck or remain permissive. I think the CEQA transportation analysis can already be a technically confusing topic depending on the project and impacts, and studying induced vehicle travel would, I think, has a possibility to be much more confusing with, I don't know what the benefit would be to that. So that, I guess that's one specific comment. A question, are you going to bring this to the planning director's meeting? Because I'm jumping ahead to what the practical impact of this would be, and for local agencies, the practical impact is going to be, okay, how are we going to mitigate? I'm concerned with some of the proposed mitigations that they provide, and that they're, from a local jurisdiction standpoint, they're completely impractical, because VMT is often location-based. You can't, parcels are developed, so you can't move a project, really, which is suggested in some of the mitigation measures. So I would think that the planning directors would like to weigh in on how exactly we're going to mitigate for VMT. One of the proposed mitigation measures that is interesting is the provision of transit. And I'm wondering how we're going to mitigate. I guess what would be the possibility of, if we were to get a new revenue source for transit in the future, and that revenue source could be used as a mitigation pot for development projects, and local agencies could draw upon that funding pot and take transit credits to mitigate for VMT for future development projects. I think at an earlier meeting when we discussed this, we talked about creating fee programs with each development, which we've done, the county's done, but it's very messy. Particularly, transit funding, incremental transit funding, project by project is probably not very good business practice. But in the absence of something better, that's what we've done. But if we could do a programmatic mitigation pot for transit, that might be attractive, particularly to your member agencies that are going to be forced to find a way to mitigate for VMT. And I guess a technical question, does our model calculate VMT? Is it one of the outputs, or can it be tweaked to do that?
It does. The newest version of the model does.
Okay. And my read, I guess, was different than Leah's. Was that MTC was going to produce the average regional figure. I didn't know that the county could do that as well. If we could do that, great. But if not, rather than MTC producing the map, I guess I would rather have CCTA produce that map rather than the MPO producing it. If we have that authority. Yeah, I think that's all I was going to say. But I think the planning directors would be interested in commenting on this.
Yeah, and I know we took it to them, the preliminary paper we took to them. So I don't remember when the next meeting is scheduled for, if it's prior to October 10th. But we'll at least take the proposed guidelines to them so they're aware of them.
I had just one more comment, and it's probably more has to do with the East County and the issues that we've had with school setting out there. I believe the new language in the Appendix G, the safety language, is their Band-Aid for the school siting problem that they can't seem to solve. And so now the safety language in there is new and fairly strong, and I think they think that is going to be the angle for the locals to pressure the school districts into doing a better job on school siting. School districts are exempt from local building and zoning, but they're not exempt from CEQA. And up until this point, up until that language has been inserted, the safety thread with CEQA has been very, very thin. So just a heads up for any future school sites. And again, most of the problems have been in East County.
Any other members? Oh.
I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware that we as MTC have created a map showing the areas that would be affected first in the 2015 rollout, those higher frequency transit areas. If you go to our online interactive map, you can look at it. It's coded as infill opportunity zones, which are the same as transit priority areas under SB 375. And you'll notice that in the CEQA guidelines, they actually decided to expand what is a TPA in here. They're using the 375 definition and not the original 743 definition. Effectively, what that means is under the original law, it would have really focused around just the BART stations in this first phase. But now it also includes high-frequency transit corridors, so frequent bus corridors. So that's a larger subset of the region that would be affected. So just go, if you want to take a look where your jurisdiction would be affected first, you can go to our website, and I can provide the link.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. We probably should have included those maps in the packet, but they are available from MTC.
Okay. We do have one comment from the public.
Wearing my tall shoes today. I'm Lisa Vorderbruggen with the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area. And like many of you, we have concerns about how this change will be implemented, particularly in the interim period. As this VMT metric moves forward, what happens to a lot of the projects in the interim, and the inevitable conflict between the LOS standard and the VMT, and in areas where there will be both or one or the other, and various members of ours who have been working on projects for a number of years based on the LOS now may be involved in the VMT side. And while the legislation, the rule does focus on transit-oriented development areas, it does allow counties the discretion and communities the discretion to expand the use of VMT. We expect there would be pressure to do that. And so certainly we'd like to see CCTA look hard and answer questions about what this interim process will look like, how this will go forward during this transition period. And let's see, I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any motions, or is there an action?
This was just for information,
Information.
but I have recorded your comments, and we will, I imagine we'll probably take a letter to the planning committee. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when, but we will be submitting the letters.
All right.
I would actually ask if, when you do that, when you complete a draft, if you can send it out to all jurisdictions, so we have the opportunity to review and weigh in. It's one thing to read over the appendix and the entirety of the document. It's another to kind of get the official response from CCTA, and I think it would be good that we all understood what the regional board, such as yourself, is stating. So if you could make sure that that gets circulated, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. And Brad told me that the planning directors meeting is on October 10th.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 8, approval of recommended PDA planning grant program.
Earlier, well, it was last year, MTC set aside $2.745 million for Contra Costa to help do PDA planning. And this is the Contra Costa PDA planning grant. There are planning grant programs in each of the 9 counties in the region. It's a total of $20 million. The authority earlier decided to take a particular approach to this, and the steps are outlined on on page 8.2. That first we would establish a list of planning consultant teams who would be able and have the expertise to prepare whatever study we might fund through the planning grant program. We'd select the projects, enter into agreements with the project sponsors on what the local match would be and what their responsibilities and the scope would be, and then work with the sponsors and the consultants to try to get some we'll agree on who the consultants are and what they'd be doing for what amount of money, and then set out the task orders, and then work with the consultants and sponsors to get the projects done. I'd like to introduce Paul Fassinger. He's one of the 2 consultants that we've hired to help us in that process, and he and the other contract manager will be helping put together those scopes and doing the marriages between the sponsors and the consultants. So the first thing we did was to send out an RFQ 14-1, asking for consultant teams. We got 14 submittals of qualifications. Each of the teams had transportation planning, design analysis skills, land use, urban design, financing, market assessment, economic revitalization, environmental assessment, and community outreach skills on the team. And we've listed the 14 consultant teams. We had a review committee, Leah Schmidt from Pittsburgh, Carol Johnson, who was at the City of Concord, Debbie Chamberlain, Yvette Ortiz, and me. And we discussed and reviewed all the qualifications. We interviewed 6 teams and recommended 5 of them. And the 6 teams actually on one of the 5 teams, so it's part of the reason we selected only the 5. And those are Arup, Opticos Design, Perkins & Will, Ramey Associates, and WRT. And the full list of who's on each team is in attachment A on page 8.6. And there is, as we suspected there would be, some overlap on the teams. For example, Farron Piers is on 3 of the 5. EPS is Lanford Gregory, and BKF Engineers are on 2 of the 5. So those are the consultants that we're recommending, and we're asking for your agreement on that recommendation. Then we sent out a call for projects for the $2.745 million in grants, and we received 10 applications totaling 2.716. So it's actually less than the money available. There's about 29,000 left over, which we believe we will need to try to make the scopes and budgets work. So it's actually helpful to have that flexibility. So the 10 projects are City of Oakley. It's a market study. It's a follow-on from work they've already done to look at the market for doing TOD and mixed-use development around a potential transit station in downtown Oakley. San Pablo Avenue Complete Streets, that's Contra Costa County. It's to look at incorporating pedestrian and bicycle facilities along San Pablo Avenue through Rodeo and towards Crockett. Martinez has a PDA market and fiscal analysis study. Would serve as an update to their downtown specific plan to look at how market conditions might have changed since the adoption of the plan. Moraga Center specific plan would follow on from their specific plan and involve changing zoning ordinance regulations to match what's in the specific plan and also develop more detailed streetscape designs. There's the SCS by strengthening public health plan for San Pablo. That would look at vacant lands and seeing how the city could make that area more of a medical center for West County. The review committee had some questions about the scope and what exactly would be done. They had questions about all of them actually, but and I'm sure that there will be a lot of discussions about the exact scope and who does what and how much it's going to cost in the next phase of the project. Grant, Salvio, and Oak Street corridor plan. There's part of the recently adopted downtown Concord specific plan. There was a proposed, what was it called, Green Street, I think, and it would look at more detailed designs for that street and as an implementation of their specific plan. The downtown congestion study for implementing Lafayette's PDA is addressing, to probably oversimplify it, addressing through traffic, how to address through traffic in downtown Lafayette, which is their PDA. The El Cerrito San Pablo PDA implementation plan is a follow-on from their specific plan as well, and look at infrastructure needs and financing. San Ramon Iron Horse Trail, that should be IHR, not IRH. They are in the process of doing some conceptual designs and trying to decide through a public process on that. But what they don't have is money for the EIR on that, and that's what this funding would be for. And then finally, a North Downtown Specific Plan. That's the biggest request from Walnut Creek. That are doing the West Downtown Specific Plan, and this would be the area north of Civic mostly, and it would extend to north of Ignacio Valley Road. So those are the 10 projects, and there's a summary of the scopes in attachment B. The next step is that we would, let me step back. There's one thing that is a matter of confusion, and you'll look on the table on page 8.3, and you'll see local match. One of the things, since it's federal funding, there will be a local match required. The local match is 11.47% of the cost of the project. Basically, the authority will submit an invoice for work done, and we'll get back 88.53% of our submitted invoice of eligible cost, of course. I will say that every calculation of local match on this table is incorrect. That is everyone, what Walnut Creek said they were going to do 20%, but it's actually only 16%. But it's still, it's more than enough, but it is still not 20% like you said it was. And basically people multiplied the grant request by 0.1147, whereas they should divide by 0.8853 and then multiply by 0.1147. Alternatively, they can multiply by 0.1295. Anyway.
Brad, we are glad that you are back and well again.
Brad, what factor did Martinez use? 0?
Well, the next thing I wanted to talk about is how that match would be provided. We will provide through the consultant work some of the match through staff time. So we will submit as part of our invoice the amount of time that Paul Fessinger and the other consultant contract manager will have spent on the process. We will also have to bill for your staff time. If local staff spent time on their project, they will have to send in documentation of the time they spent specifically on the project, and we will invoice for that as well. We won't get any money back, but we will invoice for it. And if we don't invoice enough, then we will have to bill the locals. And we're hoping, and we're going to attempt, that you will not have to have any cash whatsoever to reimburse us for it. But we'll try to figure out some way to do it.
Quick question on that local staff match. Not every capacity of a staff member is billed the same, and so is it up to the local jurisdictions to make that determination on accommodating or achieving that local match and staff hours? Obviously, staff time working to implement a plan can be billable, but at what rate? I mean, how do we know how far along or how far away we are?
You'll have to follow the federal acquisition rates requirements.
That was where I was getting to. Okay.
So that's the providing the local match, and then as I mentioned briefly, that once the authority approves the list of consultants and the projects, which we're asking you to recommend as well, we would go through and start the process of doing the marriage. We've always said, and we hope that we can have sponsors' choice on which consultants they want to work on, be the consultants that they work with. Once that's done, we'll have to work out what exactly the scopes are and what the budgets are.
Are you going to provide the applicants with a description of the different consultant teams and their areas of expertise?
Yes. Once we get that process started, we will have the more detailed, we'll provide the qualifications that were submitted to the sponsors so they know who's on the team and what kind of work they've done. I mean, for example, if you're looking to do a form-based code, there is one consultant team that is particularly skilled in that. And that's part of the reason why they were selected to be on the top 5.
Any other questions? Jeremy?
So Brad, initially the process was to do the RFP for hiring the or to select the consultant teams that would be on this preferred list. And then at that point, it was also going to be a review and selection of the PDA applications, which have already been done. And so going forward, what's the timeline, assuming that TCC supports it looks like the action you're looking for is not only to approve the firms that are listed, but also the applications that were submitted. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then what's the next steps after in terms of going back to jurisdictions, when will they be able to begin implementation of working with you? And
Here's my guess. We will take, if the TCC agrees with this recommendation, we'll take it to the Planning Committee and the Authority in September. The Authority approves on September 17th the recommendations. We will start working to get contracts with the consultant teams, talking to all the sponsors, giving them the quals, and setting up meetings to. We're trying to figure out how exactly we're going to do it. But the basic idea is that we will get preferred consultant from the sponsors, and then start working with the sponsors and the preferred consultants on a final scope and budget. And I'm guessing that's probably going to take 2 months, so that maybe a month and a half, and then that would mean that we would get take the contracts and the contracts and the scopes of work and the final budgets for each of the grants to the Authority in November.
so the funding obligations are really being satisfied this fiscal year.
Well, we already have the E76. The Authority
Okay.
has the E76 for us, so we have the money.
Got it.
As all of you who've gone through the E76 process knows what that means. So we can start any time. We can start billing for it, but we do have to get that agreement between the sponsors and the consultants and us, and have contracts and all that.
So I'm so excited about the consultant team list. I think whoever did the selections and the review did an excellent job. I've worked with quite a few of these consultants, and it's pretty exciting. And I am curious how you're going to be able to get us to decide which ones to work with, whether it's a team overall or part of that team and part of another team.
Well, we assume that for some of these projects, and we specifically asked the consultant teams whether they're okay with this, and they were. That sometimes the prime consultants are not going to have a lead role. For example, in the Martinez downtown study, that's focusing on a fiscal analysis and a market study. Well, a market study on land uses, and whatever consultant involved, the prime is not going to play a major role in that. It's going to be EPS or trying to BAE Economics is another potential one, or strategic economics. One of those teams is for that particular project is the one that's probably going to do the majority of the work, and the prime consultant will be doing maybe pass-through billing and perhaps oversight on quality, making sure that they're quality product. But that's, we specifically asked that question because we knew that for some of these, not every consultant is going to be on every team is going to be involved on that particular project.
Okay, we have one comment from a member of the public.
It's great to be referred to as a member of the public instead of the evil media, as I once was. Lisa Porter-Borgen with BIA Bay Area. BIA has serious concerns about the use of transportation dollars for local land use planning, but we also understand that ship may have sailed, at least for the time being. That said, several of these proposals for this grant money involve proposals with very little, if any, tangential connection to transportation. And, we would definitely question whether or not, for example, San Pablo, should we be spending transportation dollars to help, the city brand itself as a medical employment corps? Might be a great and laudable goal, but should transportation money be spent on that? In El Cerrito, our members, of course, the builders, have particular heartburn with using these transportation dollars for a nexus study to impose new fees on developers. That makes us really excited. And even in Martinez, where I live, Martinez has been trying to do a downtown feasibility, market feasibility for years. It'd be great. Again, is this really an appropriate use of transportation dollars? So, we would really urge CCTA folks to take a hard look at these proposals and, choose those that have pretty strong in transportation connections in order to promote these PDAs. And finally, while I'm certain that Paul Passenger is worth every dime you're going to pay him, I've known him for a lot of years and he's fabulous. We also wonder whether or not Measure J funds are appropriately spent. Also, in this effort, these were voter-approved funds for project lists, and while it's not a huge amount of money in the large scheme of things, a few dollars here and there does eventually add up. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any motions?
I do
Michelle, you have a
think
comment.
if that's going to be on the record, that we need to put something on the record that maybe addresses that point. If there's not going to be enough, maybe this is a question for Brad. Is the full application going forward to the decision body, or?
What we're asking is you to approve the consultants and the list of projects with the scopes as they're proposed, recognizing that there will likely be some adjustment to the scope as we go through the process of figuring out the detailed scope and the budget. MTC set up this program to encourage the development of PDAs, and the PDAs are an integral part of MTC's Plan Bay Area strategy for reducing VMT and encouraging the use of alternatives to the driving alone and to reduce air quality thereby. And that is the link that MTC set up when it set aside the money for PDA planning.
I think that's an incredibly important framing that you just gave there, because even the scope of work initially said these were going to be PDA focused and had to make many of those linkages. So I appreciate that. So I'm willing to make the motion both that we approve the consultant list as well as the projects as proposed.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that concludes our meeting, so thank you all for coming.